Welcome to Reflections, a program where we discuss values and virtues for the transformation of the individual and the society at large. I am Father George Ehusani, and I have with me in the studio once again our friend from Germany, Kinga Poschinger. Kinga, you're welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Kinga is from Aid to Church in Need International. Aid to Church in Need International. And the last time we had her in the studio, we discussed the work of Aid to Church in Need International in churches, countries where God weeps, meaning persecuted churches all over the world, beginning from northern Nigeria, Borno State, Maiduguri, and then the surrounding states, and then Pakistan, China, India, places in Yemen, in Syria, in all the places where Christians are persecuted, churches suffer, where God weeps. And we told you about how Church in Need International prepared this documentary titled Where God Weeps. Kinga, you're welcome once again.
Thank you very much.
Great. This time, before we ended the last discussion, you touched on a topic that I'm interested in. And that's why I invited you again. And that is the language of the soul. We discussed the fact that people are training in all kinds of things. People learn French, learn German, learn Spanish, learn Italian, learn English, learn Yoruba, Igbo, Hausa. But that people often do not learn the language of the soul. What is this language of the soul? A lot of mystics have spoken about it. Both Catholic and non-Catholic, Christian and non-Christian have spoken about the language of the soul. And we who are Christians, since Jesus said so much about the soul, what does it profit a man, he says, if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? We are supposed to be experts, we Christians. We're supposed to be adept at this language of the soul. But what appears to be happening is that if you talk about the language of the soul out there, a lot of young people, even older people, may not know what you are talking about. So our viewers will be interested in what is the language of the soul.
Well, how would I put that? I think in the end, it is this deep inspiration that is within us.
The deep inspiration within us.
Mm-hmm. So, Santa Teresa of Avila said, for instance, that each and every one of us, there is something that pushes us to recognize ourselves.
Something that pushes us to recognize who we are ourselves.
Yes, exactly.
There is an inner voice.
Right. We can put it like that. And actually in the modern psychology, they even found it out. They did research about that. And this is what Carl Gustav Jung calls the process of individuation.
Individuation.
That's it.
Yeah, so Carl Jung called it the process of individuation.
Yes.
Discovering the true self.
Right. And I think this is the language of the soul is something that is in our deepest part. Now the question is, how do we get there? Because maybe this is also one of the reasons why it is not taught. It is not so easy. It is not something that you receive like that.
Like you study arithmetic. No.
Well, no, you also have to study it. So this language of the soul, you also have to study it. It's not something that just comes immediately.
Is this the kind of language that the mystics of our church were adept experts in? I mean, Saint Catherine of Siena, Saint Teresa of Avila, Saint John of the Cross, Meister Eckhart. Is this the kind of language that they were so familiar with?
Yes, I would say so, because if you compare all the saints, there are three common things, I would say. The first one is their faith.
Yes.
The second one is their humility.
Yes.
And the humility that leads actually to the truth. So it's the real humility. It's not being humble and saying, oh, I have sinned so much, I cannot do anything, anyway, I will fall again. It's the humility in the truth.
Humility in the truth.
Yes.
And the humility that leads to more truth.
Right.
And part of that truth is the truth of the self.
Exactly.
The truth of God, but also the truth of the self.
Exactly. And then the third thing which is common among all the saints is actually this capacity to abandon ourselves into God, in God.
The capacity for self-abandonment
Yes.
into God's hands, self-surrender.
Yes,
And another expression is detachment,
completely.
including a detachment from the self.
Yes, which is very difficult.
Yeah. So discussing the language of the soul, you are beginning to go into the territory of the mystics. And and I actually, my little exposure and study of this is every Christian is invited to be a mystic.
That's actually our call.
That's our call. So mysticism is not something for some high up persons where that is unachievable. That we are all called to be mystics because we are called to relate with the divine.
Yes, and I think it was Rana who said the Christian of the 21st century will be either mystic
Or it
or
is.
it will not. Exactly.
Yes. So you are either a mystic. I mean, I have a poem, Christian mysticism. One of my poems, I express exactly that we either embrace mysticism or we cannot be religious in the 21st century. That in the midst of all the noise and all the confusion and distractions of our age, we either embrace mysticism or we waste our life in all these distractions. I mean, just look at what the mobile phone has done to our generation. People cannot spend 10 minutes without checking their phones. People are addicted to all kinds of things. And mysticism points us to that detachment.
I think just one of the problems also why we are so slow in learning it is also because it takes time. And it's not something that you acquire in a week or two. It is something that is for your whole life, because it is a journey that you at one point you have to take the decision and you say, okay, now I start this. But then the more you go on this path, the more you discover that actually to reach really the end, it's at the end of your life maybe.
When I came back from my retreat that you know about, my 21-day retreat, I spoke to the members of my chaplaincy about this. I discussed the fact that I was beginning a journey and that I was no longer comfortable with Christianity as we have been living it, that I want something deeper, and that I want only those who are ready to travel with me, and that I may end up with just a few people with me. And a lot of people didn't understand what I was talking about. I mean, I felt lonely. I felt alone because many people just couldn't understand what I was talking about. I was telling them that just to come and dance around and celebrate and to come on Sunday and fulfill Sunday obligation, that's not the kind of Christianity I want to live, and that I want companions in this journey of becoming, in this journey of growth, and many didn't understand what I was saying.
Yes, but I think we also have to be careful and to pick up people at the places or at the stages where they are. Because when I started this, for instance, there was a sister who told me I should do inner prayer for 45 minutes every day. I had never done that before, so for me it was
10 minutes before, so
too
how
much.
do you do 45 minutes?
If they tell you to do 45 minutes from a beginning on, you will never even start because it's too long.
Yes.
So if she would have said, okay, start with 5 minutes,
Yes, and then
and
10
do that
minutes.
for some weeks, and then go to 10, 15, and then, so now then you get used to it. So we also have to think that very often Christians are still
At the
far
elementary
away.
level. And go to that level, begin
yes,
at that
and teach
level.
there and show them. Because if we point out to all the big saints, they would say, well, anyway, that's for the saints. I would never have this call, which is not true, because we are all called to holiness.
To be saints, yes. We're all called to be saints. That's why I really see it as very challenging how to promote this idea, especially in an environment. We are in an environment dominated by the prosperity gospel, a lot of noise, a lot of display of wealth and power, and Christianity is associated with power and achievement, miracles, and so on. Yet, this language of the soul is talking of surrender, submission, humility. The environment is very difficult for us to preach this. What do you suggest? How do you suggest we go about it?
Well, the thing is, if you look around, even though these people follow all the material things and they have everything they want, but then you see that they are not fulfilled. They want to have more. So I think if they would realize that the biggest happiness that you can have is actually to find your own vocation. I mean, God, he's very creative. So he never makes one single person as the other one. Even twins
they are not the same.
No, so everyone is unique and everyone has a unique vocation. And to find out what is your unique way, this is what really fulfills you. It's not having a lot of things. It's not about having, it's about being.
So this whole thing, it came out very powerfully in Pope John Paul II in his encyclical 1987, Centesimus Annus, on social concerns. He deals very powerfully with the dynamics of having and being. We are called not to have. And Christians should recognize that the Lord didn't call us to have. The Lord called us to be. To be. And we are finding it difficult in our age to be. And it is only when we embrace the call to be that we can now look into ourselves. We were sharing earlier today that people actually run away from themselves. Right?
Yes.
People run away from themselves and any opportunity to be alone. That's why immediately they take the phone. People run away from themselves. So Carl Jung's individuation, people run away from that encounter.
Yeah.
And the true self becomes lost. You know. So we are dealing with what psychologists call the ego versus the true self. The ego is our camouflage, right?
Yeah.
With power, with money, big car, big house, many children, many wives, girlfriends. These are all camouflages, and they help us to run away from who we really are in God. And some people, including the Buddhists, they say who we really are in God is kind, small, like Jesus says, unless you are like a little children, it's a little child, small, compassionate, forgiving. But somehow, why is it that we pretend to be who we are not?
I think because it gives us a certain strength, or at least we think, because we can hold
something
on things.
We can hold,
yes. Instead, when we think that we start this journey, it means that we have to make ourselves somehow naked. Naked in the sense that we cannot hide us behind things. It's
but
like
we make ourselves vulnerable.
Right?
And human beings don't want to be vulnerable.
It's true, although it said the more you are weak, the stronger you are.
St. Paul says, yes.
Right. But what I wanted to say is also when you go through this, on this journey or on this path, at one point, actually, you discover the masks that you're wearing.
At some point, the scales fall off your eyes.
Yes.
And you now discover that actually you've been wearing a mask.
And the problem is you discover the person that you are, and the Greek word for mask is persona, because
persona,
it's the Latin word, the sound that goes through the whole, where the voice comes out, no? Yes. The personare. So it's actually the mask that we are wearing as a person. And when we discover the person that we are, suddenly we realize, oh, maybe I'm not the one that I'm pretending to be. And it's very difficult to go through this.
I mean, to get to that point, that's a wonderful stage.
Well,
to get to that point where I realize that I am not the person I have been pretending to be.
Yeah, it's already a big step.
Oh, that is a wonderful stage. That is when the person calls for help, because the person recognizes I need help to become the person that I am in God, in Christ.
Yes. And then if you go further, you reach a stage where where you're in completely harmony, and where you are not afraid to encounter the fears that you have. You are not afraid to encounter the complexes that you have. You are someone who goes to mass regularly. You can show yourself actually naked before God. You're not hiding anything personal.
The psychologists talk about facing your shadows.
Right, exactly. It's
so
that.
You are not afraid to face your fears.
Yes.
To confront your fears and face your shadows.
Yes.
And the masks are dropped.
Right. And I would say that a lot of Christians reach that. The problem is that it is the danger that they think they have reached the end, which is actually not at all the case, because if you compare it to Santa Teresa of Avila and her interior castle, you are only at the third
You have just
mansion.
arrived at the third mansion.
Yes.
And you still have 4 mansions ahead of you.
Yeah, yes, or at least 2 more, because I would say that the 6th and the 7th is really her own vocation, to be this mystical saint.
Yes.
We don't have all the same vocation to become her, as she was. But at least to the 5th stage, we can all reach that easily, and then discover our own vocation in the world.
So it's a journey, and a tedious journey for human beings, and becomes even more tedious in such a busy world, in a world of busyness. And we think that we find fulfillment the more we do, the more we have.
Yes.
So we are in a world of doing and having,
and running
we
away.
run away from being.
Yeah.
I mean, you have been traveling along this path. Part of the reason I brought you to the studio is to tell our viewers how we can travel along the path. And
well, I think really the first thing is to take the decision and to say, okay, now I'll do it. I'll start to look really into the truth of myself and to be humble, because it is not easy to look into what is inside of us.
Yes, you say the first thing is to take a decision.
Yes.
But how do you get people who are so engaged in looking for money, in every day they go to church to cry and pray over having a husband, having children, having money, making contract, getting employment? How do you even get them to think about who they are? How?
Well, I was a little bit in the same situation. I was living in Luxembourg, which is a very wealthy country where you earn quite well. I'm the eldest of 5 siblings. I have younger sisters who are married, who have children. I'm not married. So somehow I was a little bit in the same mentality, looking to earn more, to maybe get married one day, to have my own family. But since I saw that earning more money was not fulfilling me, and it's not because I have a new car or I have a big apartment that I was happier, that suddenly I myself started to think, well, there must be something more.
Now, meaning you had the kind of experience that Augustine had. You see, in the 4th century, Augustine, by about the year 400, Augustine got to a point where he was a teacher in a law school, teaching law. He was a very upcoming, successful academic. And then he had a lot of girlfriends, and he had whatever. Then he discovered that something was missing in his life. Something was missing in his life, and then he now was in search of something more. Now, what do we require to do as church to help people recognize that just having a big car, having a big house, rising in profession and career is not enough? Because a lot of people are still in that rat race. Just to climb more. So you see people who have more money than you, and you say, maybe if I have as much money. What do we need to do as ministers of the gospel to help people recognize that just having more of these vanities, what the author of Ecclesiastes calls vanity of vanities, that at the end of the day, you'll be disappointed because God has created you for something much more?
I don't know. I think we have to help people to reflect on themselves, because it's not enough to tell them. I mean, I can share my story, of course, but I'm not sure if this is enough, because they would say, well, this is just someone from Germany who had this experience. It does not touch me. So I think we have to make people aware that they have to take the time to reflect these same questions for themselves.
Reflection.
And in silence, and not being somehow in the middle of
too
this
much
noise
I mean,
hurry.
there is a saying that we all know about in this society. Is in English: empty barrels make the loudest noise. So, with so much noise all over the place, it may be an expression of the emptiness inside and the fact that people are running away from themselves. So in your own journey, I mean, tell us something about it. You had to slow down. You had to spend some time to listen to yourself, right? And the voice, that voice within you.
Yes. But it was actually more because I was lucky. I was told that, and I was listening also. Of course, it's both. You have to listen because someone has to tell you that it is possible, and also to realize that no saint was born as a saint. At one moment, they took the decision. They said yes.
Thank you very much for saying that. No saint was born as a saint. We are all born with original sin.
Yeah.
We are all born with our original addictions.
Yeah.
We are all born with the desire to grab this and grab that. Look at children, they grab. You give a child a cookie, he grabs it, and you say, give me. He say, no, it's my own. So we were all born to grasp and grab and have more and more of the pleasures of this life. But at some point, you stop.
Yes.
And say, wait a minute, there's something more to this life than this grab.
And also to take it serious, because if we are all called to holiness, then if we really are all called to that, then that means it is possible for each and every one of us.
God cannot call us to holiness and then make it impossible for some people.
Of course not.
If we are all called to holiness, it means it is possible for everyone.
Right. And we all have our own call and our own, because I think holiness it's very simple. It's not to die as a martyr. Maybe some have this.
Some have
call.
calling to die as a martyr.
Right, but I think it's more the capacity to say yes to God and to the call and to the vocation, to the single vocation that each and every one of us has.
Mm-hmm. They say that the saint is the one who knows the one thing that is important.
Right.
So saying yes to that one thing. So every day God is beckoning on each one of us and trying to direct us to the one thing that is important.
Mm-hmm.
But we either say no to him or we're not paying attention to him at all.
Yeah, it's true. But still, it is possible. And I think this is also, I mean, Jesus Christ came also on to this earth to show us a way, to show us how to become saints and to guide us. He said, the one who sees me sees the Father. So we have to try to, well, to since he is within us, to find him within us, because if we find him within us, we see the Father, no?
This is something that we definitely need a second session to continue discussing, because in this country, Nigeria, we have a lot of church going. It's not like Germany, where when I was in Germany, we are told 11% of Christians go to church. I hope it has grown beyond 11%. But in this country, 90%, 95% of Christians go to church. And yet, I am able to see that we're not growing. We're not growing. 90% of Christians going to church is some kind of camouflage. People are not doing that journey, interior journey. People are not experiencing what Thomas Keating, the Cistercian monk we discussed, calls the divine therapy. People are not experiencing the divine therapy. So people are agitated and they are grasping and greedy, unforgiving, not having that peacefulness around them. So in the second session that I hope to have with you, we will discuss this whole thing about how do you recommend that this journey should begin in our country? with the kind of problems you can see, how do we begin this journey? I have tried to speak to people about this, and sometimes I feel lonely. I feel lonely in the sense that many people can't even understand that there is a need to go beyond the superficial. I like to bring this to an end and hold you down in the studio for another session of this discussion. I've been speaking with Kinga Poschinger from Germany, from Aid to Church in Need International, discussing the interior journey, discussing the language of the soul. Kinga, it's wonderful having you.
Thank you, Father.
We might come back to the same issue of public funds being spent for the 2019 elections after that election, given what is going on. I don't think lessons have been learned even by those who are prosecuting the perpetrators of the 2015 election fraud. So I worry that those who are prosecuting people who stole public funds to run elections have not taken the lessons from what they are prosecuting others for.
As a Pan-Africanist, nothing has pained me more than this idea of that the North is educationally backward. Because for me, it goes to the core of racism, that black people are accepting, I'm stupid, yes, I am stupid, lower the mark for me. That's basically what the
so that's what you mean by lack of a sense of shame.
Exactly. How can we as Africans accept that a group of us in a part of Nigeria are saying, yes, we're stupid, yes, we cannot learn, so as a result of that, lower the cutoff mark so that I can pass. This is something that we as a country really needs to say, this is unacceptable. We need to be able to say, no, there is nothing wrong with the intellect of a northerner. There's nothing wrong with the learning ability of a child in northern Nigeria. What is missing, that they don't have the support that they need. And as a country, we should be able to say, no, as black people, we're not going to accept that there's a part of this country that says, I am stupid, I cannot learn.
Those who have money, or even the very average person, he tries every penny he has, sells his property, and he now says, okay, they've killed the universities here. A-levels aren't even good here. You send your children abroad. You are running a risk.
Seriously.
You are bringing up, children are being raised in an environment that's not your own cultural environment. So they are going to imbibe funny values.
And come back and you don't recognize your own children.
Exactly. Then what investment have you made for your old age? They are out there in that country. And when they see the goodies out there, many of them, they become so skewed, they don't even want to come back. So you are going to have another generation of
Nigerians who cannot relate with Nigeria.
Then successful parents, in quotes, their children have done well academically, and they are going to be left to live their old age in misery and loneliness.
I'm Father George Ehusani, and I have with me in the studio once again Kinga Poschinger from Germany. Kinga, you're welcome.
Thank you, Father.
Great. I insisted that we needed to have a second session this time to discuss the language of the soul, to discuss what you were saying in the last session about the interior journey, the divine therapy. You said we are all called to be saints. Holiness is a universal call, but each person's part is different. What would you consider your own part?
To take the decision to start. So,
your part is to take the decision to start.
Yes, so to realize that there is this call for holiness and to find out where my path is. It's like if you have a big puzzle and each and every one is a little piece. So where is my piece fitting? Is it more here, or is it here, or is it here? So I have to discover that. And this is a decision I take. Say, okay, now I will really look into my piece and see where it fits. Mm-hmm. And then transform myself to become this piece.
Mm-hmm. So you see the piece like what is in God's universal design, where do I fit? Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
In God's universal design, where do I fit? And then I go in that direction to fit into it. Now, I did say that in this session we will discuss the practicals. How did you begin?
Maybe I was lucky, or maybe it is also something that is common for all of us, because our life it's not always what you would say happy clappy life. So there are periods where you go where it's more difficult. And very often it is a trauma, a trauma that wakes you up.
Uh-huh.
And suddenly you realize, okay, I have to change something. And once you have realized that, it is up to you to take the decision what direction to go. Do I now really look for what I was created for?
So an event.
Yes.
Many times not very positive event. Something that stops you, like in some cases it's an accident. For some people it's a loss.
Right.
For some people it's a disappointment.
Right.
For some people it's illness.
Yes, exactly.
But something that
right.
that
It can
God-
be a broken relationship,
Yes.
something like that suddenly makes you realize, you wake up.
something that wakes you up.
Yes. And then I was very lucky, because then I met a priest who was proposing a school of holiness. And he invited me to participate. And in the beginning I said, well, okay.
What is that?
Let's have a look at it. But when I did this year, I actually discovered that what he was teaching was working. So his idea was to teach us how to find this path into our deepest part. And how did he do that? Well, he used the interior castle of Santa Teresa of Avila on one hand, but on the other hand, we also looked into the truth of ourselves. So that was more of psychoanalysis.
Psychoanalysis.
And to discover actually our subconscious, which had more to deal with the analysis of our dreams, like the ancient fathers did before. They analyzed dreams, because the subconscious cannot really speak to you in words, so it uses images. For instance, I don't know, if you dream that, or you have a friend who is very strict, very severe, and you dream that he dies, it doesn't mean that he really dies. It is more that something in you is very strict and very severe, and suddenly this is transformed little by little. So something which was very severe in
Something
you
dies in you, yes.
right. So actually it's very positive. And when you realize that, and when you start analyzing your subconscious, and on the other hand you approach yourself more and more to God by taking these measurements of
Taking certain measures in your life. Yes.
exactly, then you see that it really works. You can follow actually your soul from one mansion to the other.
So you are able to be in touch with the deepest part of your being.
Yes.
So there is an event, and then by the grace of God, there is an invitation.
Right.
It's an invitation like you got from the priest. And then you went with, well, maybe, let me see what he's talking about. Then you discovered, as he took you through St. Teresa of Avila's mansions, and then as he took you through some techniques of psychoanalysis, then you saw it works. And then you keep going.
Yes, because it's not something that, I did that, the first year was about St. Teresa of Avila, then I had a year of, like an intermediate year, and then I took a year of St. John of the Cross. And I cannot say that I finished, no. It's something
it's very profound,
you keep on going, and you discover.
So apart from St. Teresa of Avila, doing studying the mansions of St. Teresa of Avila, St. Teresa of Avila, for our viewers, is one of those who has done a lot of work in this interior development and getting to know the Lord and getting into communion with God. And the what is her book called? The
Interior Castle.
The Interior Castle. Anyone who wants to grow in the deeper spiritual life has to know something about the Interior Castle. And some people have done some short summaries of it, in case it's too big for others.
Yeah, and the language is not easy to understand.
The language is not so easy to understand. Then you did 1 year of that, and then you got into St. John of the Cross.
Yes.
Saint Teresa of Avila and Saint John of the Cross are contemporaries, and they led to the reformation of the Carmelite order. The Carmelites are a group of monks and nuns that have done a lot of work in this interior journey. And Saint John of the Cross and Saint Teresa of Avila. So you went through Saint John of the Cross again. Wow. And then you are lucky.
Yeah, I was lucky. I was lucky because and I think this is something that our church is really missing today, because very often, well, I see that at least in the church in Europe, the teaching of the church is very much based on the caritative work. So we have to help the poor, we have to do this and that, which is true. And actually, Saint Teresa of Avila says the aim of this journey is not to find yourself, it is then to bring fruit. And of course,
and
our
it is the fruits, as St. Paul says, the fruits of the Holy now include charity and
exactly, which is true, but right.
So
but you cannot just put away this part of doing this interior part and just go to
charity.
Yes, because then it might not be the real fruit.
Yeah, because I mean, if it is just charity, Muslims have charity, Buddhists have charity,
NGOs
have charity.
Yes.
So it is particularly Christian what Thomas Keating calls the divine therapy. That God wants to live in us, and He wants us to be aware He lives in us. So that's not just charity.
No, and I think if we are called to be the light of the world, is also because this light is already
inside us.
So we have to just to find it, but not to remain there and to keep it like our own treasure, but to bring it out. And I think this is the call, and we have to learn, because you have a lot of, at least again in Europe, you have a lot of these people saying that you have to find yourself, and this is the most important thing, to find yourself. But Santa Teresa of Avila put it in a very beautiful picture. She said it's like a bee who is in her, I don't know, how do you call the house of a bee?
Yes.
Yeah. So
beehive.
In a beehive. So she's in a beehive making the honey, which is very important, because if she was not there, you would not have the honey. But at one certain point, she has to go out and collect the nectar of the flowers.
Yes.
And she compares it to our soul. So it is very important also that we are within us and we find the truth in a very humble way about ourselves. But at a certain point, we have to go out and look to the majesty of God, and because it's not about us.
No, it's not about us.
It's about the light which is in us, and somehow to transform ourselves to become transparent so that this light can shine. And you were mentioning that the more you go on this journey, you can feel alone because you're not, people do not understand
when you don't have a number of people around you who are going on the journey with you.
Yes, but on the other hand, the more you reach this truth, the more people you attract, because the truth attracts.
Yes.
So it is, on one hand, yes, maybe people do not understand you, but on the other hand, you can give an example with this. The more you become transparent,
the more people.
But there is a big danger, because somehow when we see that people are coming to us and looking up to us, this is a big danger, not to become a narcissist. So to love ourselves and to say it's because of me. So to remain humble is...
That's why humility is such an greatest essential
very
ingredient of the path of holiness.
Yes.
The path of Christian holiness.
Yes.
So what is your day like when you wake up?
Well, when I started that, I thought, okay, the best would be to do my half an hour interior prayer in the morning. But I'm not a morning person. So I realized that start my day with this prayer, I would just fall asleep again. So I have changed it now. Sometimes I do it in my lunch break. Sometimes I do it in the evening. I think each and everyone has to find out what is
the best time for it.
I cannot say this is the way, because we are unique, no? For me, it turned out that morning is not. It's difficult. But what I do is that I try constantly to be connected to God. So it's not about only the time I spend in prayer, because God did not, or Jesus did not teach his disciple in the desert. He teach them in daily life. And that means that we have to realize this presence of God in our daily life, because it would be not very useful if all the Christians or all the Catholics now go to the desert and pray. I mean, the world would collapse, and we need people in their different tasks.
So the
Politics.
awareness, the continuous awareness of God's presence inside me.
Yes, and you can do that while you're working on your computer, while you are doing, I don't know,
Did you ever
on the
read
market.
about Brother Lawrence?
Yes.
Yeah,
who was
Brother
washing the
Lawrence.
dishes.
Yeah, Brother Lawrence was washing dishes
Yes.
and then cleaning the kitchen. A 17th century French monk
Yes.
who was not educated, but he was working in the kitchen and ended up producing that wonderful work about the practice of the presence of God.
Right.
So he has taught the world how to be aware of God's presence continuously.
Yes, and this is something very important. It is not about being well educated.
Yes.
He was a very simple man. So it is more, the education that we need is not, it's not only intellectual education. What we need is the education of how to realize or how to discover this presence of God in us. I think this is the big challenge of the church today.
Yeah, so it's we got evangelized in a manner that was more like rote memorization of answers to certain questions. Who made you? God made you. Why did God make you? God made me so that this and you know, this question and answers that came after the Council of Trent, where catechism was more of giving the right answers to certain doctrinal questions. And until today, this is pretty much what it is, rather than helping people to know the Lord, as it were, helping people to love the Lord. We got into this rational approach to catechism, to introducing people. It's a problem. And once people know those answers, they believe that they have known Christianity.
No, but it's just knowledge, and I think I had already mentioned that. No, the translation of the Good Shepherd.
Yeah.
If we look into the Greek word of good,
It's
it
beautiful.
means beautiful,
The
and
beautiful
actually
shepherd.
it's because if we speak about the Good Shepherd, good leads to morality and to moral answers.
Commandments.
But if we look into the beautiful shepherd, beauty is much more. Beauty is based on love, and that changes completely the image, because
dynamics.
it integrates, of course, a moral questions, moral answers, but it's much broader. It's much broader.
So if we look at Jesus as the beautiful shepherd, the human being naturally desires what is beautiful.
Right.
So we naturally gravitate towards that which is beautiful. They say that the human calling is for the beautiful, the good, and the true, you know, and the real. Now, to what extent is our evangelization and pastoral care geared towards directing people to that which is beautiful? This is perhaps the question, the big question.
Yes, and I think this is true for the universal church. It's not only here in Nigeria, it's the same in Germany, it can be the same somewhere in Latin America. I think we have to go back to teach really the beauty of our faith, the beauty, because very often people turn away from the church because they are disappointed, but they are disappointed because maybe they were taught something which was either too moral or too
rigid, too moralistic.
Yes, but
rather than show the beauty of Jesus.
Exactly, and the beauty of God. And God is so big, we cannot find a word for him. It's difficult. We cannot define him, actually. Each time we put a definition, even if we call him Father, it's already limited.
Yes.
Because we think of our own Father, and it limits completely.
And if my father was a hard, brutal,
or if he was absent because I didn't have a father.
Yes, you know, Gerard Hughes, the Jesuit priest who wrote the book The God of Surprises, speaks of Uncle George. Uncle George image of God, who was a strict, talk about hell, talk about sulfur burning in hellfire. If that is the image of God you grew up with, then the concept of God as beautiful and as desirable begins to go away. And those who grew up with that kind of idea are the ones who easily leave the church when they grow up. So it means we have a lot of work to do, we who are agents of the gospel, to present to people the God of beauty.
Yeah. And of love.
The God of beauty who is attractive and to which the human soul gravitates. You know. And how to communicate this language. This is the language of the soul.
It's true. But a lot has to be done to train. I think also it is something where the priests would need better training. The priests, because they are the ones who then transmit this to the lay people.
Yes, by their life and by their words.
Yes.
Yeah, I still remember when I met you 2 years ago. When I met you in Germany, and I introduced the concept of our psycho-spiritual institute, and you discussed with me, and I got to know that you were doing these trainings in John of the Cross, in Teresa of Avila. We were able to strike a bond because you were attracted to the fact of the psycho-spiritual development, which is an interior thing. And unfortunately, many people have not had such exposure. And I think that is where the problem is.
The problem is also that in our world, psychology and spirituality have been divided.
Have been separated completely.
So, but if we have the science of psychology, which could help us to reach our interior part, so why do we not use it?
Yes. And that's what we are doing at the Psycho-Spiritual Institute. What we are doing at the Psycho-Spiritual Institute is to say, listen, we have this wonderful, rich legacy of spiritual, contemplative prayer, of spirituality, rich legacy of soul care in the history of Christianity. And then we now have today, thanks to psychotherapy, a lot of tools to help in discovering the true self. Why don't you bring them together so that this knowledge of psychotherapy and this knowledge of soul care in the tradition of the church, bring it together and you have a rich tool for going in and for healing our brokenness, our fragmentation, you know. Earlier today we were discussing about the fact that the camouflage that people camouflage there, we are only covering our brokenness, our fragmentation. What do you say? What do you have to say about that?
No, it's true. It's true, because we are hiding behind things, and we do not want to show our emptiness, our weakness,
vulnerability, our brokenness.
Yes, and I think the first thing we also have to learn is to be humble, and to accept what we are.
To accept what we are, and what we are is small, you know, and small is beautiful. There's a book that is with that title, Small is Beautiful. To accept that we are small, to accept that we are weak, to accept that that as Jesus Christ says, unless you become like little children, to accept that little child inside us and embrace it.
Because being small does not mean that we are worthless. I mean,
No.
we have God within us. So we are also, it's also a big treasure that we have within us. So it's not about feeling guilty all the time or only pointing out to our sins. I mean, the Greek, the Hebrew word of sin just means that we did not hit the goal.
Yeah, we missed the mark.
Right. But I mean, yes, that happens. So we just try it again.
Yeah.
It's not that we are completely worthless, because there are a lot of Christians thinking
Manichaeism. It's called Manichaeism, the heresy of our worthlessness. And if we are worthless, but Jesus has come And with the incarnation, we are no longer worthless.
Yeah, we have this beauty in us. We just have to be able to become, once again, transparent.
Yes.
And to radiate this light which is within us.
And open ourselves to the light, radiation, to the light of Christ. The light of Christ that is already there. By virtue of our baptism, the light of Christ is there. Yeah. We are given that light, and that light does not go completely dim in spite of our sin. It remains.
Yeah, Teresa of Avila, sorry, again, she said, it's like if we had a big diamond, a beautiful diamond, and it is as if we covered it with a black material, with mud. It is still there. Yeah. It's just not able to reflect the light.
Yeah, it's not able to reflect light because it's been covered with mud on account of sin.
Right, but we can take the mud away.
And
we go to confession
and
then we start again. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, which is very comforting and consoling to know that, you guys in the studio, to know that you have a diamond inside you. You have a diamond inside you, and those of you in the control room, you have a diamond inside you, and all you need is, with the grace of God, to clear the mud away, and the diamond will shine again. So let me hear what is your last word to Nigerians. You have been in Nigeria for a few days, and you will soon leave. Nigerians who genuinely desire to be close to God, what do you have to say to them?
Well, I have seen that Nigeria is a very beautiful country, and I have met wonderful people here, really wonderful people. Also a lot of, in the north, people who are already very deeply rooted in their faith, in the Diocese of Maiduguri, for instance. In other dioceses, people who are really looking for, they're hungry for the truth. So I would just recommend to them that they really take the decision and say, okay, now I start. Because I think everything starts with the decision, and then God will lead you. If you open your ears, you open your heart, He will lead you because He's there, and He's calling you. He's anyway calling you. So if we do not take the decision to open our hearts, to open our ears, it's difficult for Him to call. But if we say from now on, okay, I'll start, then we will start to hear the voice, and then perseverance, to be perseverant?
Persevering.
Perseverance.
To persevere. I mean, that is to say, the Bible says, if today you hear the word of the Lord, harden not your heart. So if today you hear this call to a deeper interior life, harden not your heart. Make a decision. Don't be afraid. Jesus keeps saying, don't be afraid. Don't be afraid that, I look at the life of Saint Teresa, I look at the life of Saint Damien the leper. Oh, I cannot live like that. Don't be afraid. Because it's not your work.
And you are not called to the life of others. You're called to your life. So anyway.
Don't be afraid that the life of holiness God has called you to, if it was not possible, God would not have called you to it.
No, but He called everyone, so it is possible.
Yeah, so it is possible. If it were not possible, He wouldn't call you to it. So if He calls you to it, it means it's possible. And as you keep saying, your path to holiness doesn't have to be the path of holiness of another person.
Oh, no.
It is your own path to holiness. And you just have to stretch your hands for God to grab you.
For the start, because then the second part is the grace of God.
Yes.
So the first thing is that we start, but then He takes us, as you said,
Yes. So He is already God even takes the first initiative because He calls.
Yeah.
And all we do is respond. And as we respond to say, yes, I am willing to come, but see me, see how weak I am, and then He grabs us. So we need a measure of sincerity. We need a measure of openness and sincerity and readiness to be helped. It's like somebody who is in a pit and who says, I am here, I need help, but he needs to raise his hand.
Yes.
In order for...
And he has to do it by himself. No one can do it
for him. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I congratulate you for your own journey. And before we started, somebody had said, how your journey can be of help to others. How you can share with others your journey, so that others, you don't have to be an orator. You spoke at our chaplaincy to the chapel members, and you spoke very calmly, not as an orator, but very calmly, but it was powerful. So I want to encourage you to keep sharing when you have this kind of opportunity, to keep sharing in the quiet, calm way as you share, because it is powerful. I have been speaking with Kinga Poschinger. She is at Church in Need International, where they help persecuted churches. She's been to Maiduguri to see the persecution of Christians in the northern part of Nigeria. Her colleagues go to Yemen, go to Jordan, go to different places where Christians are in real difficult situation. In China, in a lot of the countries where it is difficult to practice our faith. And along with just simply going to support those Christians in various ways, Kinga is showing what it means to live the Christian life and to have the Christian life as a treasure, right?
Absolutely.
As a treasure. You know, Gerard Hughes, who wrote The God of Surprises, speaks about going after the treasure, and then only to discover that the treasure is inside you. Now, the treasure that Jesus is talking about is inside each one of us. God has planted that treasure in us, that we need to go in to recognize that treasure. And it is only in the center of our being that we really discover God. God is not discovered in the periphery of our being. It is in the center. It is this going in that we discover God. But with all the noise we make, go to church and dance around and all kinds of stuff, we are not prepared to go in. There's too much distraction around us. It is only when we stop, slow down, stop, invite God, say the prayer of the Holy Spirit, come Holy Spirit, then we can begin the journey as our guest Kinga has begun the journey. I pray that you continue to grow. I pray that you continue to advance, that your mentor Teresa of Avila, that you continue to advance in such a way that your life will be a blessing to all you come across. God bless you.
Thank you, Father.
Thank you very much.